I wanted to do a recording on the comparisons in the world about from yesterday to today. I remember when I was a young kid in the early 1950s, my mother would take me to like a shoe store, and if you wanted produce, you went to the produce market. If you wanted meat, you went to the butcher area, which had like chickens and stuff in cages, and you hear them all squawking at the same time. And there really weren't any what we call variety stores at the time. The only variety store that I knew about was the Woolworths. And the Woolworths was a store where you can buy a hanky. You go in there and buy an ice cream banana split, or an ice cream sundae, or a handkerchief, or some stationery, or some shoes or slippers, and so forth and so on. But a lot of those stores didn't exist. And then there was Sears, which had the Sears catalog. And they were kind of like a department store, but basically a lot of what they did was through the Sears catalog. And at one time, like 25 or 30% of all the homes in the United States had a Sears appliance, like a refrigerator, a washer, or a dryer, or whatever. And they were known for this. Now, things kind of progressed to today. Today you have the UPC codes, where they used to need like 10 cashiers. They just swipe it right through with the UPC codes, and you don't need as many cashiers, and it keeps inventory and gives you the price all in one swoop, and it also gives you the change. When I worked with cash registers when I was running gas stations, they would give you the amount of money, but you had to make the change in your head. Where the modern cashiers, they look at the cash register, and the cash register makes change for them. And the UPC code gives the amount and the inventory and everything else. And then you have the ATMs, which is the automated teller system, which is outside of banks and gas stations and convenience stores or Wawas or whatever today. And they need less bankers. So in a sense, they need less cashiers, they need less bankers, and then you have the post office where people send emails, and instead of what we call snail mail today, and the snail mail is very slow, and you have to put stamps on it. And in fact, today you can even buy stamps over the internet and everything else. And places like Sears, which combined with Kmart, started closing up because people were starting to order things online rather than going into a store. And they can price comparison or comparison shopping by going from one internet site to another. So it shows you how much society has changed in its purchasing practices. When we go back to New York in the early 1950s, you had each store separately: the shoe store, the produce store, the meat butcher shop. I remember they had all kinds of like sawdust on the floor, and there were chickens in the cages making noises. And to me, it was a dirty, scary place from the point of view of a young kid. And now even Sears with its catalog is fading, and Macy's is having problems, which was a high-end store, rather than the average everyday store, because people are starting to buy things online. So all society has changed, all their purchasing ways that they purchase, the way that they retail. And slow but sure, the retail stores are giving way to the internet purchasing. And you can buy almost everything from eyeglasses to cars online. They're even trying to eliminate car salesmen, where you just get your price online. You don't have to haggle, and it cuts out some middlemen. So all of society's purchasing The way they purchase, the way they buy has changed with the internet. And of course, cell phones, yeah, people order things right over their phone. They get the weather. They don't have to buy cameras. There's a camera in their phone. It's the internet and cell phones have affected every phase of life, from the post office to the Sears catalog to the ATMs to the UPC codes, which eliminates a lot of cashiers. And even today, like years ago, if you had manufacturing in your city or state, there were hundreds of workers on an assembly line, which of course Henry Ford developed. And he actually developed like putting a car together, and there were hundreds of workers, and he even gave his fellow workers more money than the market because he wanted them to be able to afford to buy his cars, which was, he was actually an idealist, even though he invented the assembly line. But today the cars have changed. They're mostly plastic and aluminum, and with the wheels and everything else, and the gas mileage has increased, and they become very electronics, and they call it used to be a mechanic, and now they're all technicians. So every phase of life has changed with the internet, with the cell phone, and it's progressed. You send faxes from the beaches they advertise. You send emails. You send texts. So you text somebody, and communication is like 100% today. And people are so involved with the internet and with cell phones, it affected every phase of retailing. The way people buy, their buying habits, the cashiers, the post office, the UPC codes. With the modern factories, they don't need hundreds of people anymore, because right now most of the manufacturing is done with robots. And a big factory may have a couple of technicians, an engineer, a few people to do some manual stuff, but the days of hundreds of workers on an assembly line are over, because robotics has really replaced the mass amount of work is required to run a factory. So if we got factories back, other than bringing a tax base to a town or a state, employment's not a big issue anymore with all the robotics. And the health field, of course, has changed with all the diagnostic equipment, the CAT scans, the MRIs, the ultrasounds, and medicine. And of course, what developed when I was younger, you paid a doctor $20, and you went to his office, and he would see you. If you were real sick, he would come to your house. And I remember my mother boiling their instruments with hot water on a stove. And today, there's not the tendency for a doctor to come to your house. There's what they call hospital-owned practices, and they went into managed care, which is like the HMOs. Years ago, you just paid a doctor straight out. It was the cost was lower, and today you have the managed care. So somebody has to belong to a health care system in order to almost see a doctor. And of course, it developed a huge bureaucracy of people that have to get paid, the secretaries and the CEOs of the HMO companies, and everybody's making money. It actually increased the cost of medicine, where initially it dropped the cost for a short term, but on the long term, it increased the price of medicine. So even the HMOs and the managed care medicine is really an invention of the new age. You used to just strictly go to your doctor, you paid, and maybe you had hospital insurance. like Blue Cross or whatever, if you wound up in a hospital. But now there's a question of the pharmaceuticals and managed care and getting referrals and so forth and so on. And it increased the price of medicine. And a lot of people don't know why the hospitals today are so high priced. For every one person in the bed in a hospital, there's about 8 employees. It's about an 8-to-1 ratio because you need security, you need receptionists, you need nurses, you need doctors, you need phlebotomists to take blood, you need a lab, you need x-rays and ultrasounds and MRIs and CAT scans and security people and maintenance people and housekeepers. And when you add it up, the ratio is about pretty close to 8 people working for every one person in a bed. And that's without the huge capital investment required to keep up with the healthcare system, the place itself. So the capital investment of X-ray equipment and MRIs and CAT scans and so forth has an astronomical cost, along with the 8 people required for every one person in the bed. And I figured I would just bring out some of these thoughts and ideas. And I hope that some of them meant something to somebody that made them think, well, there's really 8 people working for one patient, or that the UPC codes have changed cashiering, or the emails have changed the post office, or the ATMs have changed the banks. And the technicians on the new model cars, where you have the computers in the cars, have changed the auto industry, and how robotics have changed manufacturing. So I wanted to bring out all these points because I'm the type, I constantly think about these things, and maybe other people do too, but maybe I have an idea that somebody else hasn't thought about.